Thank you all for joining us today on the Friday webinar. No, today is not Friday. I'm traveling, so I thought today was
It's
Friday already.
miércoles.
Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Barbara Mojica. I'm the executive director of NLCUP. I know that, a lot of the names and faces that I'm seeing are very familiar, but we are so grateful that you're here today. And we have Pablo de Felipe. And we're so honored to have Pablo because he's just done a lot for the movement, for the Latinos in the movement, for the Latino communities across the country. So we're super excited to interview Pablo today. Pablo is also a founder of NLCUP and currently sits on the board of NLCUP, as to many other boards. So Pablo de Felipe, I am going to get started. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself first, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Absolutely. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, everyone, actually, for taking the time to listen, but hopefully to participate. This is a conversation. So hopefully some of the topics we're going to be talking about will spark your interest in jumping in. So please don't hold back. This is about creating community, something that we need now more than ever.
Thank you, Pablo. Pablo, so the first question I have for you is you also immigrated and built a career in the US. In fact, you've been in the credit union industry for over 20 years.
30
And
years, who's counting?
and were instrumental in founding NowCup. What motivated you to step into this work, and what vision did you have at the beginning of when you started your career?
So I was born and raised in Chile and lived most of my life under a dictatorship. So when I came to the US, I had the opportunity to participate in democracy, something that I have seen only on TV for the first time, right? The first president that I ever voted for was Clinton. So it's been a long time. So when you see the US from outside, you see this country as a country of opportunities, a country of science, a country of reason, a country of, the self-made man, right? And when we came to the US, we came to New York City. And I was just blown away by two things. One, the level of poverty I saw in New York City. And number two, the fact that there were a lot of cooperatives here. My dad actually is member of a housing co-op in New York City. So that was our, first place of residence. And I started working for a credit union, right? So you start thinking about, wait, this is also, in addition to science and opportunities, also a land of contradiction, because there's a huge cooperative system that helps, kind of mitigate the impact of some of the economics that run the US, right? And to me, that was, very surprising, but at the same time, I felt a level of connection with part of the US that was totally unknown to me.
That makes sense. I'm learning a lot about the cooperative system through school, as you know.
That's right.
Um, and one of the things that I am constantly angry about is the lack of representation when it comes to the history and the contributions of Latinos. And this is why this interview is happening, FYI, Pablo, because I think you are a historic figure and, we owe you a lot. And I feel that as Latinos, we owe you so much of the work that you have done has impacted. And that's why a lot of us can sit in these seats. So I wanted to give you your flowers because I know that's not often how it happens sometimes for folks. But my next question for you is, you have helped lead and grow the Juntos Avanzamos designations for credit unions. It's a trusted framework for credit unions that are serving Latinos. What do you see as the greatest impact and so far, and where is it headed?
So Juntos Avanzamos, for people in the audience that don't know about it, is a designation that was created more than 25 years ago, or 25 years ago, actually, by the Texas League in partnership with the Work Council of Credit Unions. And the whole idea was to help connect credit unions to the Latino market in Texas specifically. There was a big gap in terms of knowledge and understanding by Latinos of credit unions, and the idea was to educate the population about it. It was also kind of the result of a partnership that Texas had then with the largest credit union in Mexico. In Mexico, credit unions are called cajas populares, and the largest credit union in Mexico, even today, is Caja Popular Mexicana. And they were a big part of that concept to develop, a campaign that would help educate Latinos about the credit union system here in the U.S. We at Inclusive took that program national around 10 years ago. And the reason was that, because it was a league driven initiative, Texas, which became Cornerstone, wanted to expand beyond their footprint, and they needed, an outlet to do that. So we were really interested in helping expand that program beyond Cornerstone footprint. But at the same time, we wanted to make some changes to the framework. We didn't see it only as a marketing tool, but also as a framework for financial inclusion. I worked for the Work Council of Credit Unions a while ago, and one of the programs that I ran back then was remittances, and we learned a lot of things about the Latino market back then. And that is not just about a product, it's about inclusion. It's not just about what we think people want. It's about, helping people really achieve their dreams. And those dreams can be different, right? It's not just, sending money back home. It's about, buying a home, building a business, sending your kids to school. I mean, it's basically the same dreams that everyone has here in this country. So we realized that we needed to make sure that the framework of Juntos Avanzamos was about opportunity and access, and we created a bunch of, benchmarks, like being able to to open accounts actually for people who didn't have, documentation, or people who didn't have a social security number. But then go beyond that. I mean, taking money from a community is pretty easy, the challenge, and the opportunities in lending that money or investing that money in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Juntos Avanzamos has a requirement, is that, you have to be able to provide lending opportunities to this community without regards to immigration status, right? Barbara, you and I and many other Latino households, live in mixed status households, meaning that, we may have a cousin who's undocumented. Our parents are documented. We may be, naturalized, whatever. I mean, there's different ways that people have assimilated in this country. And if we are very selective in terms of who we serve, we are not really building trust in the community. And that's why for us, it was so important that if a credit was going to really do the work and serve this community, they needed to serve the entire community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the importance of the framework. And now, just to answer your question, we have over 160 credit unions that have the Juntos Avanzamos designation. Is a program that has a lot of engagement, a lot of commitment. We're seeing that today even more than ever. We see credit union really doubling down on servicing the community, despite all the pushback against immigration. What we see clearly is that credit unions, without politicizing the issue, we are in the financial services business. And this is, an opportunity to build, trust in this community and make sure that they understand that we are standing by their side.
Mhm. Yes. And I know that a lot of Juntos Avanzamos credit unions are also NLCUP members, so they go
That's
hand
right.
in hand, and we're so proud of that initiative. And you
And
know,
Barbara, that's a great point because, Juntos Avanzamos is not, it's like an open source type of initiative. So it has grown because of partnerships with NLCUP. NLCUP is, the other parent of Juntos Avanzamos, right? So it's a collective effort. Again, it was started by Texas, was taken over by Inclusive, but it has been always, been part of the DNA of NALCAP. NALCAP has always played a big role in educating credit unions about the opportunity, but also about the obligation. We do have a mandate to serve, people of small means, and sometimes we forget that. And maybe that's because of the success of credit unions, is that we sometimes forget that the first credit union in this country was created to serve French Canadian immigrants. So 120 years later, we're still talking about the same issues. How do we make sure that we embrace and support new immigrants that come to the U.S.?
mhm. Thank you. So that leads me to my next question is, what do you see the most urgent barriers for Latino communities, they're currently facing in achieving financial stability today? And I think that might be a mute point, but I will give you the floor because of what's happening right now in the country.
So look, I mean, Latinos, immigrants are have become a target. This is not something new. I mean, it's an unfortunate reality, but we have to really understand, how big our community is, because, when we talk about, mass deportations, and we talk about, all these, narrative that immigrants are a drag on the economy, all the data, shows exactly the opposite, right? That immigrants actually contribute to the U.S. economy, that immigrants, contribute to social security. In fact, because many undocumented immigrants, still pay taxes, that goes into their insurance funds, and that money that these undocumented immigrants will never be able to access. So there's a huge contribution that is totally unrecognized. But then if we really think about Latinos as a market, we're talking about 65 million people. We're talking about the seventh largest economy in the world. I mean, this is the power of Latinos. And when we see, political situations like what we are facing today, you know, my call and my reminder to everyone in our movement is to keep the eyes on the ball, on the prize, and that is the community. So we are not political entities. We're not law enforcement. Our mandate is very simple. It's about making sure that people are who they say they are. So we want to make sure that we are complying with all those requirements. But immigration status has never been something that trade unions or banks, by the matter, have been, forced to enforce. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that it's our choice to walk away from this community, but it's also at our own risk if we do so, because people will never forget.
Mhm.
And if we think about credit unions, we are kind of counter cyclical. We are at our best in when things are bad. Like recessions, natural disasters. People gravitate to credit unions because we are there. We don't walk away, and I think that that's the message for us collectively, is that this is the time to stay there, to hold the line, because this shall pass. And bottom line is that 5 years from now, there will be another 6 million Latinos in this country. So no matter how many people you deport, there will always be more Latinos here.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we have no choice. We have to stick by this community.
Thank you. I like that. CDFI. I know that what's happening right now is really impacting especially smaller credit unions, but as a CDFI intermediary, you've supported credit unions and community leaders, including significant work in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. From your perspective, how are CDFIs reshaping the financial resilience and equity of Latino communities? And I guess before you answer that question, you can also inform everyone about what's happening first with CDFI, and then we can tap into that question.
Thank you. So the CDFI fund is a U.S. Treasury run agency. It was established in the mid-90s to help financial institutions, not only credit unions, but banks and loan funds, provide lending to marginalized communities. So that was 30 years ago, right? And in 30 years, the CDFI fund has become a huge resource for credit unions. Over these 30 years, more than 5 billion have been channeled to credit unions, both in terms of grant funding, but also in terms of investments. And at some point, maybe a couple of years ago, we had around 550 CDFI credit unions. Now, CDF5 credit unions come in different shapes and sizes, small, medium size, and large. The largest CDF5 credit union in the country is Suncoast in Florida, and they're, 20 billion in assets. So the message here is that pretty much any credit union can be a CDF5 if they focus on serving these marginalized communities, which, by the way, is something that is totally sustainable. And I think that SECU knows that. I mean, SECU has supported Latino community for a long time. You guys have worked very closely with self-help. You've supported a number of smaller credit unions, many of which are either minority or CDFI certified. So SECU understands that, and I think that that's important because, there's a huge impact that CDF5 credit unions can make in communities, and that impact goes from, offering payday loans that help people, move away from payday lenders to developing or offering affordable housing options or, second chance checking accounts. I mean, there's different ways that CDF5 credit unions have really helped improve local economies, financing for small businesses, community facilities. There's a very wide variety of lending projects that CDF5 credit unions have been able to finance because of these investments that the CDF5 fund has made. Now, I say investments because, what we have shown in our data is that for every dollar of grant funding that comes to a CDF5 credit union, there's $14 in impact, that comes out of that. So it's a huge leverage, mechanism. It's not a subsidy, and that's something that we have been today saying a lot more frequently because the CDFI fund under this administration is under attack. Today we're the CDFI fund, actually Friday, they received the entire CDFI fund. Employees receive notices of termination of employment. So basically, OMB is getting rid of an agency that was established by Congress. So they don't have the authority to do this. And even more, Congress has been explicit about their support of the CDFI fund. Last night, I think that Senator Crapo, which is one of the leaders of the CDF5 caucus in the Senate, which has 30 members. I mean, this is more than half of the senators, support the CDF5 fund. They're members of this CDF5 caucus. They they expressed their disappointment that this is taking place because the CDFI fund is an engine of economic development. It's not a subsidy. In fact, in many ways, the work that CDF5 credit unions and other type of CDF5s do, it's a lot more impactful and efficient than the work that comes from the SBA department, for instance. So if we're talking about government efficiency, the CDFI fund is a great tool to accomplish some of the goals this administration has.
Thank you for that information. And so do we know where the status currently is after what happened on Friday, or you're still?
Well, so yesterday we had a town hall call with our members. We had a number of leaks on that call as well. And we've been asking members to reach out to their legislators, but this is, about the strategy. So we don't want Democrats necessarily reaching out to OMB. We don't want the CDFI fund to become another chip in the bargain table. We want Republicans to take the lead because, if they do that, and that's what Crapo did last night. I mean, he, called on OMB to reestablish or to rescind these actions. So we are more hopeful now that Republicans clearly are not happy with these termination notices. Now, time will tell. One thing that we have learned also is that this administration has been a lot more aggressive in terms of taking measures that even contradict, the authority of Congress. So we're hoping that they're going to listen to Crapo, but we don't know, and we're not going to know until something official comes out from either from Treasury Department or OMB, and that may be tied up to what's going on with the government shutdown. So it may be weeks before we find out what's going to happen. In the meantime, our mission and our job is to make sure that legislators understand the true impact of CDF5 credit unions and that we as a movement collectively understand that as well. And, I have to be, I have to give credit where credit's due. And we have seen, America's credit unions actively reaching out to legislators. We have seen leagues taking the lead as well. In South Carolina, I know that Dan Child has been also talking to Senator Scott. So there's, all these connections that we have as a movement that will help convey the importance of the CDFI and not as, a political or partisan, program, which is, the way that OMB is looking at it right now, because they think that since it was created by Clinton, it has to be a Democrat, program, but it's not. It's always been a bipartisan supported agency. So we're hoping that Republicans will be clear about the message and that OMB will ultimately listen to them and do the right thing.
Mm. No, we're hopeful. We're hopeful. And I want to make a pause here for anybody in the audience that may have questions for Pablo. You're welcome to raise your hand, speak up, or put it in the chat if you're not comfortable with opening up your mic. But I just wanted to let you all know you guys have the option to ask Pablo some questions as well. So for my next question for you, Pablo, and moving back to, the Latino community, from your experience, how can credit unions leverage cultural events, language, and share heritage in building deeper trust and engagement with the Latino members? And what roles does celebrating identity play in financial literacy and empowerment?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a long question. God, there's, like so different pieces to it. But, let's start with credit unions and connecting with the market. I think that, and this is a message that NLCUP has been, promoting for a long time. We cannot um, build trust with a community that doesn't see reflected in our employee makeup. So if we are really serious about serving Latinos, we want to make sure that our employee base, reflects that community. And I understand. I mean, large credit like SECU have different communities to serve. So it's not, something that happens across the board, but it has to happen, specifically in those branches where you have a community that you want to connect with. I've seen multiple times, like frustration, about, well, we built this branch here and they don't come. Well, they don't come because they don't see themselves reflected in the makeup of that branch. So that's important, and that's only one piece of it. It's just making sure that we are able to reflect the communities we're trying to serve, but also it's about decisions, and it's about leadership and making sure that we, as financial institutions, are able to engage Latinos in positions of power within the organization. We have seen a lot of movement in frontline employees. There's a lot more diversity now than 10, 20 years ago. I don't think that we have seen the same level of change at the leadership level.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where we have to be more strategic. And this is, a little bit about, opportunity, but also about understanding that our future and our relevance as credit unions will be determined, and I can say this, with 100%, confidence, but our future will depend on our ability to connect with the Latino population. It's that simple. If we're not really able to serve this community, we're going to be irrelevant. So right now there are what? Latinos represent 22% of the US population. By 2050, it's going to be 35% of the population, right? So it's a huge market, and a market that is still untapped, right? And we cannot tap that market without leadership that really represent this community. And when I say about leadership, it's not just about executives. It's also about board members. Because it's also about ownership. One of the biggest advantages that we have as a model is that we are democratically owned. And I think that that notion of owning, of being able to influence an organization, is critical to connecting with Latinos and immigrants. And I can say this out of my own experience. When I came to the US, I came to New York, and um, I joined a credit union that my father had helped establish. And that credit union's, uniqueness was the fact that it was an exact representation at the board level of the community. And that allowed that tiny credit union to grow and to survive, in a place that is, the financial center of the world. But, was serving or opening accounts to people who have never had a bank account. And this is like 2 miles away from Wall Street, So again, let's think about the opportunity, but also the obligation that we have to comply with our initial mandate, serving people of small means. It's part of our DNA, and we have to really make sure that we walk that walk.
Thank you. And so, in terms of the next question, what are I think you discussed this one, so let me ask you the next one. What makes you the most hopeful about the future of Latinos in financial service, politics, and community leadership?
So in moments of crisis, we see who's who. And I think that, almost consistently, what we're seeing from credit unions, that are Juntos Avanzamos or that just support, these communities, that there's a clear commitment not to walk away from Latinos, not to walk away from immigrants. Um, a month ago, I was in California and I visited some of the fields, strawberry fields, and you know the work that migrant workers do is hard work. It's work that nobody else is willing to do. Yet we had credit unions there that you know serve a much more um, um, like a market that is more, financially stable, middle class people, but they were so um, committed to serving this community because they understand that without this community, the whole local community collapses. This is the foundation of it. So when I see that type of commitment where, credit unions in places that are, actively being targeted by this administration are still actively going out and serving and connecting with the community, it gives me hope that collectively we're going to hold the line, and that because of that commitment, this community will think of us as the channel for their future. If they don't see that we are taking that chance today, you know, when things change, we're going to be an option. And an option is never good, right? So we want to be the financial industry of choice for this community. And the only way that we can get to that point is by making sure that we are here with them now when the situation is not is not good, right? So we want to make sure that they see that we are committed, that we're not walking away, and that gives me hope. I think that that's something that most Ukrainians, in our network understand. They see the opportunity. They see also, again, their obligation to hold the line. And I feel that we will overcome this.
Mm,
And that when we do, we're going to be stronger than ever.
yeah. Um, Marisela has a question in the chat. As the movement is going through a rough patch with DEI, are we losing trust, and how do we build that again? Acknowledging that we have seen credit unions and CUSUS changing the language around DEI and how they speak about it internally or externally, sorry.
Oh, Marisela, that's a great question, and it's a disappointing answer because we saw so quickly the movement, not everyone, but some in the movement changing. The last this year's GAC, for instance, there was no mention of DEI. We had, for years we had work with NLCUP, ACUC, CU Pride, and others to promote and build this, DEI Tuesday, theme that was, that had become, part of the feel of the GAC. And all that work kind of, went away pretty quickly. And I think that that's a mistake. Um, At the same time, I recognize that there's, we have to be practical, but there's, like a fine line between dropping what you're doing and changing, how you talk about, but you maintain the commitment to the work. And that's, to me, it's a bit of an issue, that we're not seeing the same level of support for DEI initiatives, but at the same time, we see that many credit unions and some credit union organizations, you know, maintain that commitment and that work. So it's it's disappointing on one side, but I'm glad that the work that many are doing is not being dropped at the same time that they're dropping the label, or that they're dropping, their support of DEI publicly. And in some places, there's a reason for that. I mean, there's communities where people are a lot more vocal, and we don't want, the work to stop. So we recognize that sometimes you have to be strategic, but I think that, collectively we can walk away from, the message. And that's what worries me with our collective, as an industry, as a movement, is that we too quickly drop this, um, words, there's something called, um, there's a word for something when you comply in anticipation of something that may never happen, that wasn't asked from you, and I think that that's really what we're seeing in some part of the movement, is that obedient compliance, that's the term, is that people are doing things without being asked, just because they think that that's the right thing to do. And and I have my opinion about that, right? So
Yeah, yeah. So I know to close us off, because we're so grateful for your time, and we knew John Herrera couldn't make it, so we might end a little bit early for the audience. But what message of empowerment would you like to leave for young Latinos pursuing leadership and impact in their communities? And I think we really need to hear that. Because if I can speak for a lot of us, younger folks, is that we're feeling a lot like I feel personally hopeless, watching constantly what's happening in the community, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, am I doing the right thing by staying in this country? That's a question that often comes to my head. So yeah, I don't know if you can share your wisdom.
my wisdom, I don't know. I think that wisdom comes from being here before. I mean, this is not new. Maybe what's new is just, how deliberate and systematic these attacks have been. But you, as an immigrant, you've been there before, Barbara. This is, being discriminated is nothing new to your own life experience. I don't think that that's new to any of us here on this call. We have lived through it. And I think that that's something that we have built muscle memory. And I'm hoping that that's going to be what helps you guys keep going. The one thing that we cannot do is to give up. And the reason is because if we do, what we have accomplished, that is not little. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, but what we have accomplished will be lost. And the next generation is going to start digging out from a deeper hole that we started, building this from. So pain is not new to any of us. Frustration is not new to any of us. We are resilient people. And that's really what I love about our communities, that, most of us, came here looking for opportunity, not for handouts. We know that we have to work twice as hard to sometimes make half as much. It's a reality that we should not, accept. But we know we've been there before. So my message is that this is not about us. It's about who comes next, right? It's about our future, our, children. So we have that obligation. We cannot give up because of that.
Mm, thank you. Well, that is all the questions I have prepared for you. Do you have any other final thoughts or words for us or message before we close this webinar out?
Well, I I want to talk about SECU because I don't know the people on this call, but I want to tell you guys that SECU has been a leader in our movement for a very long time. My first contact with SECU was, Jim Blaine, and some of you may know him or heard of him, but he was a legend. Lee Brady, your CEO, worked closely with him. And, SECU has been an inspiration and a big support for many in our industry. They supported, as I said at the beginning, Latino community. You have supported self-help, you have supported inclusive. Back in the day, inclusive was known as the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions. And SECU was a really important, supporter of that work. So you should be proud of being at SECU, but know that SECU is also a big organization and you have a job to do there that goes beyond your daily work. It's about educating your colleagues and your leaders, about these markets. Not only Latinos, but, financially underserved people across the board in North Carolina. You know, it's a situation, it's a reality, and it's also an opportunity. I also know that CQ has supported local governments credit union. It's one of the largest CDFIs in the country today. So know that you have helped, developed different responses, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. And that leadership and that support is important. And I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you. I know we have some folks from SECU here, and when we post the recording, I'm sure many more will watch it. So we appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Pablo. It's always a treat to get to listen to you, and I think we all feel inspired. And I hope that this interview with Pablo, who is a legend, and I will not ever get tired of saying that, Pablo, it's inspirational to all of us, and it gives us hope, and it gives us that little bit more leap of faith that we need to continue this work. And I hope that you all can see that this work is important, and it's important not just for us, but for the people that are coming after us. So thank you again. Thank you for joining us here at NLCUP, and stay tuned for the next webinar. Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Pablo.
much.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Bye bye.